14 years after a quiet black family mysteriously vanished at an isolated desert rest stop, a highway expansion project uncovers a sealed underground structure buried directly beneath the site. Inside, investigators find preserved belongings, a child's notebook, and traces linking the family's final steps to a forgotten government testing facility from the 1970s. As the truth slowly unfolds, it becomes clear the Brooks family didn't run, didn't break down, and didn't fall victim to anything supernatural. They were pulled into the remnants of a decommissioned research wing that locked behind them and silently erased their trail from the surface world. The story explores how abandoned systems can trap the innocent, how the desert hides the mistakes of the past, and how one discovery finally gives voice to a family lost between the echoes of history and the hum of forgotten machinery. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. The Brooks family wasn't the type to make headlines. They were quiet road trip people. Playlists, trail mix, the occasional "Are we there yet?" drifting from the back seat. That summer of 2010, the heat hit different. A dry, buzzing heat that coated your throat and made the horizon wobble like it was breathing. They were on their way to Phoenix. Nothing dramatic, nothing unusual. Just a long drive on an empty stretch of Route 77. Miles of nothing stitched between lonely gas stations and that one desert rest stop people only used if they absolutely had to. That's where everything changed. The Brooks sedan pulled into the lot at 2:41 p.m. The engine clicked softly as it cooled, dust settling on the windshield in a slow, lazy film. Malik stepped out first, stretching, rolling his shoulder like he'd been carrying the road on it. Tiana followed, shading her eyes with one hand, scanning the horizon like she could feel the heat pulsing off it. And then there was Nia, 12 years old, headphones around her neck, tracing little circles on the passenger window with her fingertip. She stepped out slowly, blinking against the sun, the dry air sticking to her skin. She tilted her head just a little. Almost like she was listening to something. That part stuck with investigators for years. The way she lingered near the restroom wall as if something behind it hummed. The rest stop itself was old. You could smell the age. Rust on the railings, faded arrows on the pavement, vending machines that buzzed louder than they should. The desert wind scraped across the concrete, carrying bits of sand that whispered against the car doors. From a distance, two travelers leaned against their RV, watching the family with that quiet curiosity people get when nothing else is happening. One of them whispered to the other, thinking no one could hear, "You ever get a weird feeling at this place?" The other replied, "Yeah. Cameras here glitch like crazy." Funny thing, he wasn't wrong, because at 2:43 p.m., the surveillance feed jumped, just a little flicker, like someone had pressed fast forward for half a second. When the image steadied, the Brooks family was gone. Not running, not wandering off camera, just gone. Their car still sat there, doors closed, AC humming faintly, a bottle of water on the front seat beating condensation, a purse left untouched. Nia's headphones resting on the dashboard. Investigators later described it as the quietest scene of chaos. Not a sign of struggle, no footprints leading away. Sand around the building undisturbed. The kind of emptiness that felt intentional. A couple filling their cooler nearby swore they didn't hear a thing. Just the wind and, strangely, a low, steady tone coming from the building. Almost like the vibration of a generator buried too deep. They whispered to each other, "Didn't they just walk by?" "Yeah, but where'd they go?" Their voices cracked with confusion, not fear. Yet. The sheriff's team arrived an hour later. They walked the perimeter, hands on hips, wiping sweat with the backs of their wrists. One officer pressed a palm flat against the restroom wall and muttered, "Feels warm, like something's running behind here." But nothing was. At least, nothing they could find. Search teams combed the desert for days. Helicopters kicked dust into the sky. Volunteers walked in long, staggered rows, calling the families' names into the heat. Each day felt heavier than the one before. Nothing. No tracks, No belongings, no signs of dehydration or distress, just a silence that felt pointed. Rumors grew the way desert storms do, slow, then suddenly everywhere. Some folks swore the rest stop sat over an old sinkhole system. Others whispered about abductions, cults, strange government testing sites from the 70s. Truckers traded stories under neon diner lights. That place always gave me the creeps, man. Cameras cut out every time I pass. But the most unsettling rumor, the one people only said when the sun dipped low, was simple. People hear things there. Not voices, not screams. Just that hum. Low, persistent, like something waiting under the concrete. By the end of that first week, the case officially stalled. By month 2, it was labeled unsolved. By year 3, it was all but forgotten, smothered under desert wind and paperwork dust. But the car remained in evidence. And so did the questions. 14 years of them. And the strangest part? The rest stop stayed open, as if nothing had happened there at all. But people who stopped there, they always described the same feeling. Like the silence had teeth. Like the air was holding its breath. Like something beneath their feet wasn't entirely asleep. That's where Act 1 ends. In that heavy, suspended moment before discovery, the long, painful pause before the truth begins pushing itself back into the world. 14 years passed before anyone touched that ground again. 14 summers of the desert stretching wide and empty, swallowing footprints, swallowing memory, swallowing anything that dared linger. By then, Route 77 was breaking down. Potholes, faded lane lines, guardrails rusting like old teeth. The state finally approved a highway expansion project, and a road crew rolled in during early spring. Big yellow machines against a pale sky, the kind of sight that makes a town think, oh, finally. The crew worked slow under the rising heat, pushing sand aside, leveling the terrain, marking cut zones with orange flags that snapped in the wind. The rest stop, that infamous one, stood just beyond the boundary. Most workers avoided it instinctively. One morning, just after sunrise, the excavator operator, a guy named Luis, eased his machine forward to dig a trench for a drainage line. The desert was quiet, that early morning stillness when the heat hasn't started breathing yet. He lowered the bucket, pressed into the sand, listened to the dull scrape of earth shifting. Then, a different sound. Not a thud. Not a rock strike. Something hollow. A clean metallic clink. He paused, lifted his goggles, squinted at the trench. That didn't feel right. He reversed the bucket slowly, sand falling in soft streams. The other workers drifted over, curious in that casual way people are when they want to act like nothing's wrong. What did you hit? Probably junk metal. Might be an old septic tank. They whispered these guesses under their breath, not wanting to spook each other. But you could hear the unease in their tone, that please don't let this be weird energy. Luis climbed down, boots sinking half an inch into the sand. He crouched at the trench edge, brushing away packed dirt with the flat of his glove. Something smooth emerged. Not rusted, not corroded. Smooth like brushed steel, except darker. A crew member muttered behind him, trying to sound relaxed. Bro, what did you find? A spaceship? A laugh followed, tight, nervous. Another whispered, Don't joke, man, not out here. They kept brushing, slow, deliberate strokes. A curve appeared. Rounded. Structural. Too symmetrical to be debris. And one worker, a younger guy always chewing gum, stepped closer, squinted, then quietly said, Yo, that's a door. Not aloud, not announced, just breathed out like the desert might hear. When they cleared more sand, the shape became clearer. A sealed hatch. Rectangular, reinforced. Embedded so deep it must have been there for decades, maybe longer. Luis tapped it gently with his knuckles. The metal vibrated, giving off a faint resonance. A low hum that seemed to travel into the ground itself. One of the workers stepped back fast, hand over his chest. Man, nah, that sound? I don't like that. Word reached the site supervisor, then the county office. By noon, a small group of officials stood around the trench, arms crossed, brows furrowed, the sun baking the backs of their necks. Someone took notes. Someone else photographed the hatch. Everyone avoided mentioning the obvious, because now the questions weren't about the hatch itself, but what might be beneath it. By the next day, state authorities arrived. By evening, the FBI asked to observe. The desert hadn't seen that much activity in years. Trucks rolling in, equipment humming, the air buzzing with old secrets trying to surface. The hatch was finally opened on day 3. Not dramatically. Nothing burst. It just released a soft exhale of stale, cold air. Air that didn't belong to the desert. Inside, a shaft leading downward. Metal rungs built into the wall. A faint echo rising from below, like an empty room remembering a sound. Experts descended first, slow and cautious. What they found wasn't a bunker or a storage tank. It was a corridor. Long, narrow, lined with paneling that didn't match any public construction records. Dust coated everything in a thin gray blanket, but the structure was intact, preserved by decades of sealed isolation. Air vents ran along the ceiling, humming with the same low vibration Luis had felt from the sand. The team pushed deeper, and that's when the discoveries started aligning with something forgotten. They found plastic wrappers matching a brand discontinued in 2012. They found a child's keychain, a little cracked star with glitter trapped inside. They found a shoe print in dust that hadn't been disturbed since the day it was made. Authorities compared it to archived items from the missing persons case. The size, the shape, the pattern, it matched Nia. A heavy stillness filled the corridor, as if the structure itself understood what that meant. When investigators reached a chamber at the end of the hall, they found more. Items belonging to the Brooks family. A water bottle Malik bought earlier that day. A scarf Tiana was photographed wearing at a gas station minutes before the rest stop. All preserved by the absence of weather, untouched for 14 years. No signs of violence. No signs of panic. Just belongings sitting quietly, arranged as if someone placed them down in a moment of confusion, expecting to return. And tucked deeper inside the chamber, hidden behind a collapsed duct, they uncovered something that changed the direction of the entire case. Blueprints of the facility, stamped with a government seal from the 1970s. Marked, Prototype Testing Wing, Decommissioned. And one line scribbled in faded ink. Do not open, area unstable. Everything from Act 1, the humming rest stop wall, the camera glitch, the warm panels, suddenly seemed less random, more intentional, more concealed. But the truth wasn't fully revealed yet. Act 2 ends at the point where the past finally begins pushing its way into the present. Slowly, heavily, like something waking up after too long underground. When investigators realized the underground chamber was part of a decommissioned government testing wing, the case shifted from a mysterious disappearance to something heavier, something that carried the weight of decisions made decades before the Brooks family ever stepped into that rest stop. The facility's blueprints hinted at experiments with acoustics, vibration mapping, and environmental stress testing. Nothing sinister, just old research abandoned when budgets dried up and newer tech took over. They sealed the lower levels and covered the surface with new construction. But sealing something doesn't always mean silence. Over time, vents warped, panels shifted, resonance escaped. That low hum Nia noticed? It wasn't her imagination. It was the sound of the past trying to rise. Investigators traced the pathway through the corridor, recreating the possible route the Brooks family walked. There were faint indications, not footprints exactly, but the soft compression of dust, the slightest touch marks near a rusted handrail, the lightest scuff along a panel where someone steadied themselves. The family didn't run. They didn't panic. They moved slowly, almost calmly. Experts believe they followed the sound, the same subtle vibration workers felt when they opened the hatch. A resonance so low it nudged your curiosity without your permission. a kind of instinctive pull you don't notice until you've already stepped forward. The underground chamber had emergency systems that malfunctioned decades ago. When the Brooks family crossed the threshold, the old door sensors engaged. A lockdown sequence triggered. Not aggressive, just automatic. A heavy door slid shut behind them. And old mechanisms don't always let go. Inside the chamber, investigators found something fragile tucked behind a stack of fallen air filters. A small notebook wrapped in a scarf. Weathered, edges curled, but intact. The handwriting was small, neat, a child's hand. It was Nia's. The entries were simple, matter-of-fact. A kid trying to make sense of something strange. She said the humming feels like a song but not a scary one. Mom said it's probably just machines. Dad's checking the door again. My ears feel funny like when we go up a mountain. Still waiting. Mom said stay calm. The last entry wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even frightened. It just said, I hope someone hears us. That line settled across the entire investigation room like dust. Not panic, not terror, just a quiet plea from a child in a place the world forgot. Investigators determined the chamber's ventilation system slowly failed over time. The facility had no exterior access once sealed. No immediate danger, just isolation. Silence became their only witness. When construction buried the rest stop decades earlier, it buried the facility too. Years later, the Brooks family walked into a place designed to be forgotten, and it fulfilled its design too well. After the discovery, the town didn't explode with gossip the way you'd expect. Instead, a heavy stillness settled, the same heavy stillness that had hung over the case for 14 years. People gathered outside the investigation site, whispering softly, slower than usual. That poor family? Man, they were right under us all this time. You never think something like that can happen, until it does. The Brooks relatives came to the site days later. They stood together, hands linked, eyes lowered toward the desert floor. No anger, no shouting, just a slow, steady grief. The kind that has grown roots because it waited too long for answers. A memorial formed near the rest stop. Flowers, notes, a photo of the three of them smiling in front of a rental car from a different vacation. People who had never met them stopped by, leaving small things. A stuffed animal, a prayer card, a rock painted with the word heard. The state quietly updated its records. The highway project rerouted. The rest stop was permanently closed and fenced off, not in fear, but in respect. And for the first time in 14 years, the desert felt different. Less like something was hiding, more like something had finally spoken. In the end, the Brooks family didn't vanish into thin air. They didn't run or wander or fall victim to some nightmare theory. They stepped toward a sound, a remnant of an old world beneath their feet, and were caught in the machinery of forgotten history. Sometimes the scariest truths aren't dramatic. They're quiet. They're buried. They're the things we build and abandon without thinking of who might walk over them years later. So as the sun set behind the dunes, casting those long orange shadows across the ground, people whispered the same soft thought. At least now, we know. And the desert, which had held its silence for so long, finally exhaled. If this story stayed with you, don't leave just yet. Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and tell me what part struck you the deepest. Your support helps bring more quiet, haunting mysteries like this to life. Stick around. The next story is already waiting in the shadows.